writing teachers have known for some time that most of the writing, learning in writing comes from revising, right? Getting a hard look at your work, going back in, and making the changes that really lead to improvement. And so peer review has generally been the preferred means of doing that in writing courses, but it creates a fairly significant logistical problem. And when you have a shortened timeline, getting a review in and getting the results of a review in time for that still to matter for that exact assignment, that became a challenge. And so we developed Eli for that immediate pedagogical reason, but it synced with some other things we had going, and so we put some analytical goodies in as well. It supports two things really: coordination of writing review in classroom or formal learning environment settings, and assessment of review as a practice in and of itself. Not just assessment of writing, but an evaluation of the review process and how individuals are doing at meeting some review goals that you might have, so that you can make teaching and learning of review itself a focal activity. Again, many writing teachers especially, but folks all over the curriculum might have as a learning goal, I want students to come out of my class better able to assess, evaluate, and recommend changes as peer reviewers in their own chosen area. But it's proven difficult to teach, and it's mostly because review activity is difficult to see. It happens offline in many cases. It's ephemeral. It might happen in informal ways around a table or over email in ways that aren't easily captured. And so it's hard for teachers to intervene meaningfully. In a large section, it's nearly impossible to intervene when you have 500 people or 250 people in a semester. They might be talking to each other, but you can't tune into all those conversations. And so that's part of what we're trying to do with the coordination and assessment. The main object in Eli that we're going to see is a review, and all the other things that are in the system are part of a review. And I'm going to come back to that point because I think it's a point of contrast with other similar systems. And if you think about Microsoft Word, for example, a review is part of a document. And that creates a little bit of this logistical problem that we're talking about. It might well be the thing we spend the most physical class face-to-face time doing in most writing courses, at least. And that is having students work in groups to read, assess, evaluate, and understand each other's work. And the learning impetus behind that is mostly about making what is implicit or tacit more explicit. When we think that when students are asked to represent revision strategies to another person, they're more aware of those strategies as a repertoire for their own use. And so this process of peer scaffolding, as it's sometimes called, is a powerful learning tool at all levels. It's very, if you have kids in school, they're in peer groups doing this a lot, and that's the learning rationale behind peer review. Another reason it has to do with some questions we were asking at the Research Center beyond the immediate pedagogical reasons that we started working on Eli, and that is we were thinking about what does it mean to help people, support people's learning on a much larger time scale as we transition to a knowledge economy. Learning to write doesn't begin and end with a single experience in the classroom or even the 4 years you're at college. You're always acquiring new literacy skills. That's compounded by the fact that new technologies bring new literacy challenges as we go along. So now you have other genres to master, you have other media to master. What does that scale and addressing learning on that scale, how might that work? And if you think about where then people do that learning, if it's not in formal settings on the job, where is it? It's likely in review. That is, you're relying on knowledgeable peers to help you get better. And so that means that we need to have knowledgeable peers who know how to help their peers get better. Review becomes a really important skill in a knowledge economy. And I know as academics, many of you understand what it's like to get poor reviews from peers and what it's like to get good reviews. And you really value those helpful reviews that help you improve something rather than the ones that you could practically throw away. Yochai Benkler points to a problem, and that is that we've radically scaled our capacity to do something called peer production of content, of information. Lots of people can make things and put them out on the web. They can make videos, they can make audio, they can make text, they can shoot pictures. But we're nowhere close to being able to scale review or a quality control process. And so we have an inherent economic issue there. Self-selection bias says it can't all be good, right? So at the Research Center, we took this up as a legitimate challenge and question. What might it look like? What might review processes look like that could scale at the level of peer production? And so these are some potential answers. And I can get into that some more about when we talk about the future. Here's the review workflow that we're going to show you. And we're going to start not from the writing, but from the review process. Somebody creates or comes up with the notion that a review should happen. In classrooms, it's usually the teacher. Then reviewers go to work reviewing what they've been asked to do, usually in groups. So in a writing course, this is often in groups of 2, 3, or 4. Often the review coordinator does some things to help structure the reading and review and response process, offer criteria, offer an explicit template for giving feedback, that sort of thing. That's all possible in Eli. So the reviewers do those responses. We gather all of those up under one review object. But of course, we also understand who gave us what and in response to which thing. Something that doesn't always happen, but which teachers really want to see, and that is the writer must respond to those reviews. We want to see, as a teacher, did it sink in? What are they taking away? In this case, the writer can also rate the reviews. We see this in other kinds of peer response systems. Amazon is the most favorite. Was this a helpful review? The teacher can respond. This is a really powerful one for teachers. This is a big time saver, and in our K-12 user group, this is one of the favorites. You can, instead of reading all the things, you can read through the reviews as they come in, and you can endorse peer comments that you as the teacher agree with or that you think match the criteria well. Then when the reviewee sees that feedback, they see their peer comments. They also see the peer comments that you've endorsed as the teacher. This also gets fed back to the reviewer. So the reviewer knows that the comment that you made was endorsed by you. That's a good comment. So they get some formative advice about when they're doing well and when they're maybe needing to step up their game a little bit. It's possible for the writer then to create something called a revision strategy in Eli. This is up to the instructor to specify whether they want that to be a formal part of the review or not. Again, in writing courses, this is a typical activity. You might ask the reviewer to turn in a revision plan. Eli allows you to do that right here in the structure of the review. And it allows you to do it by adding the comments that you've seen to your revision plan. And then you can do things like, you can say, yeah, I like that piece of advice. I like that piece of advice. I like that piece of advice. You can rearrange them. You can add your own notes to self. And you have a revision plan that comes right out of that review process that day. The writer then revises, one hopes, and then we do some reporting. And in between that step, we have the writer tell us the changes they made. And in the present system, they actually get shown that revision plan again. And we ask if their intent to use that feedback, if they actually did use that feedback in making changes in the draft. Okay? So this is the generalized process. And the reason we lay it out in these steps is not only to make what I'm about to show you a little bit more understandable, but this helps to explain why it's something of a logistical problem, even when it's clear what has to happen for it to work optimally in less than 2 or 3 class periods. You have an assignment in which you turn things in, and everybody has to bring the assignment, or else the review fails right there. Then you have to structure the review process, give the criteria, then they have to do the review. And then the hard part comes for the teacher. They have to compile all of that review advice. If they want to make sense of the class's ability to grasp whatever the assignment was supposed to be about, let's say it's about using sources to support claims when you make an argument. What I used to do the old-fashioned way was read all those reviews and do my best to summarize them in a trends memo and say, here's what I think the class is getting. Here's what I don't see as much evidence in what that as I would like to see that we're grasping. But that took me an extra day, at least, if I was extra vigilant. And then I would come back and try to insert that feedback before they did their next revision. There are really 2 spots on the web where you can find out more about Eli. The one we're going to go to is the actual application, which you need an account to log into. And there's also a development blog that we host over at Y. And that one has a lot more information. It's open. You can see the documentation and see some videos too if you'd like to learn more.